We're just started our third day of Hanukkah, um, and Hanukkah is supposed to be a joyful time. This is kind of a rough season, however, for many, many people. Um, and Unfortunately, we were talking about suicide, and in the United States, especially, suicide is highest at this time of year. So we really want to keep those people
Certainly.
um, in our prayers. Last night, Gordon spoke about Hanukkah, and I'm going to take a little different path on it. Let's start with a word of prayer. Our dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for allowing us to be here today. I want to thank you for everything that you do, Lord. I know that you keep everyone in your hands, and Lord, I would ask that you watch over as people struggle this time of year, that you uplift their spirits and help them to uh, keep strong in you and keep their faith in you and follow your word. And I thank you in the name of your son, Yeshua. Amen. So I have a question. How many ways do you think there are to spell the word Hanukkah? Now, I spelled it Hunukkah here. Anybody want to have a guess? How many ways are there to spell Hanukkah according to the dictionary? And I'll be specific, the Oxford Dictionary. Anybody have a guess?
I'd take a guess, maybe 5.
You're not even in the ballpark. Eli?
Denise, 12.
What did Denise say?
12.
Well, Denise is getting closer, but she's still not even in the ballpark.
That's ridiculous.
Here's just a few of them. According to the Oxford Dictionary, there are 22 different ways
Oh, my lands.
to spell Hanukkah that are officially acceptable. So, I thought some of these are pretty good. I like the one with 2 N's, 2 K's, but it should have 2 H's on the end. Hanukkah, right? This is just a few. This is 12 of them, right? That's 12. I didn't put them all on. The dictionary had 22, and I go, that 12 is enough. Because they even had with an X in there. I'm like, I don't know how that works. It's like Christmas, you put X in place of it, but they did. So Hanukkah, because even in Hebrew, there's 2 ways to spell Hanukkah. And of course, the pronunciation of it or how it's written in English becomes very, very interesting. And it's interesting because when we think about Hanukkah, we think about latkes and dreidels and gelt. Since the Hanukkah miracle involved oil, it's customary to eat foods fried in oil. Of course, Eastern European classic is potato latke, garnished with applesauce, sour cream. And the reigning Israeli favorite is donuts, jelly-filled donuts. And I'll tell you, having had an Israeli professor of Hebrew, he always had a Hanukkah party that all the people in the Jewish studies program were allowed to go over. And I'll tell you, they had some of the best donuts to eat. On Hanukkah, it's customary to play with a dreidel, a 4-sided spinning bearing the Hebrew letters Nun, Gimel, He, and Shin, which means a great miracle happened there. It's usually plays for coins. Most people consider it a kid's game, but at one time it was used for the purpose of studying Torah. We're not really going to touch on that, but you'll see that was the way they got around the Greeks not allowing them to study Torah. And so they had that involved. And of course, in today's consumer-driven society, people tend to pay great importance on giving Hanukkah gifts. However, the tradition is to actually give Hanukkah gelt, or in other words, they're to give offering and donations to people who are poor. I don't have one more. It's interesting because Hanukkah as a festival really did not grow until the late 1800s in this country. And it's because of the pushback against Christmas that you saw Hanukkah take a much more prominent place in Jewish society and American society. I don't know if any of you follow any news streams. I do 3 or 4 that I glance through, and it's amazing how many Jewish articles come out at this time of the year that never come out at any other time of year. And I'm not talking just about Hanukkah. They're talking about different customs. Of course, with the war going on in the Middle East, it's been front page news since October. But you look and there's article after article about different aspects of Jewish society that you never see the rest of the year. And yet in the Bible, it really has no significant importance. Even in the Brit Kadashah, it's giving one small verse in it. But I did want to check and see how your knowledge of Hanukkah was. So before we get started, what does Hanukkah mean in Hebrew? Anybody?
Dedication.
And she is right. So we'll start off with some easy ones and we'll get tougher. We'll see if you guys can get through them all. I'm only doing 10. I didn't do a whole lot of hard ones. Hanukkah is also known as
Lights.
Festival of Lights. Woo! 2 for 2 for Eli. Looks like she's going to be the brains of the group today. So, which of the following foods is not a traditional Yorkshire, a traditional Hanukkah treat? That's I just answered it. Potato pancakes, jelly donuts,
Gave it away.
or Yorkshire pudding.
Yorkshire pudding.
Yeah, you gave it away there, David.
I did. I was looking at the answer.
Yeah, but that one was an easy one that you gave away.
It was. So what are these spinning tops called?
Dreidels.
Skittles, dreidels.
Gave that
See?
away.
Okay, here we get a little bit tougher. How many branches does how about if I advance it? How many branches did a Hanukkah menorah or Hanukkah have?
9.
9 is correct. Okay, Eli, now we're going to check your ability. In total, how many candles are lighted during Hanukkah?
Are you testing me on math? Because you have to keep putting new ones in, and I haven't done the multiplication.
12, 44, 56, or 72? What's your guess?
That's too much. 44.
44 is the correct answer. Yeah. Believe it or not, you're perfect.
How many come in a box?
Yeah, that's how many comes in the box.
Why does Hanukkah last for 8 nights?
Well, I like number 2 because the week isn't long enough.
Which reason do you want?
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's going to be celebrate Rosh Hashanah.
Number 1.
Number 1, yes, and that's a classic answer. It's not necessarily the answer I would give, but that is the answer that's official. A menorah isn't lit every night of the holiday. Is that true or false?
False.
It is false. Okay, why are Hanukkah meals fried? Personally, I was going to put down all of the above, except it's not all of the above. So which one is it?
Celebrate the miracle of the oil.
The miracle of the oil. Okay, we've got through the easy ones. Let's see who can get this one. I think I'm going to get you guys on this one. The following 2 foods are traditionally linked to Hanukkah, to the Hanukkah miracle: potatoes and apricot jam, dairy and oil, dairy and potatoes, sour cream and applesauce.
Yep.
Which one?
Sour cream and applesauce.
Wrong.
No?
Wrong.
Dairy and potatoes.
None of them are right.
Wrong.
Dairy and oil.
Dairy and oil. There's only one left. But dairy and oil. It is dairy and oil because in Sephardic communities, they eat cheese. And dairy is one of the substances that's used. And of course, everybody uses oil in frying food. So you guys got pretty good. 9 out of 10, or yeah, 9 out of 10. You're not totally hopeless when it comes to Hanukkah. You understand it, at least the official reason. So let's look at Hanukkah. And we're going to look at where it's presented in the Maccabees. And we're starting with first Maccabees. And after Alexander, the son of Philip the Macedonian, who came from the land of Kittim, had defeated King Darius of the Persians and Medes, as related in Daniel, he succeeded him as king. He had previously become king of Greece. He fought many battles, conquered strongholds, and slaughtered the kings of the earth. He advanced to the ends of the earth and plundered many nations. When the earth became quiet before him, he exalted. His heart was lifted up. He gathered a very strong army and ruled over many countries, nations, and princes, and they paid him tribute. After this, he fell sick and perceived that he was dying. So he summoned his most honored officers who had been brought up with him from youth and divided his kingdom among them while still alive. And after Alexander had reigned 12 years, he died. Then his officers began to rule, each in his own place. They all put on crowns after his death, and so did their descendants after them for many years, and they caused many evils on the earth. So we have the foundation. Why was there a Greece rule? Why did Greece rule the world? Obviously, if we remember from Daniel and the statue, you have the head of gold of Babylon, the silver, the Mede and Persians. Now we're down to the brass of the Greek, and we haven't quite got to the Romans yet. But it's during this time period when Greece had Alexander had passed away and it split up between his 4 generals. After subduing Egypt, Antiochus turned back to the 143rd year and went up against Israel and came to Jerusalem with a strong force. He arrogantly entered the sanctuary and took the golden altar, the lampstand for the oil, and all its utensils. He took also the table of the bread of the presence, and the cups for drink offerings, the bowls, the golden censers, the curtain, the crowns, and the gold decorations in front of the temple. He stripped it all off. He took the silver and gold and costly vessels. He also took hidden treasures that he found. Taking them all, he went to his own land. Now, here's a question. When we see the Romans conquering Jerusalem, they took the lampstand to Rome with them. As a matter of fact, you can see it on the Arch of Titus, right? But here it says that Antiochus had taken them. Then the king wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people and that all should give up their particular customs. All the nations accepted the command of the king. Many even from Israel gladly adopted his religion. They sacrificed idols and profaned the Sabbath. And the king sent letters by his messengers to Jerusalem and the towns of Judea, and he directed them to follow customs strange to the land, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifices and drink offerings in the sanctuary, to profane the Sabbaths and the festivals, to defile the sanctuary and the holy ones, to build altars and sacred precincts and shrines for the idols, to sacrifice pigs and other unclean animals, and to leave their sons uncircumcised. They were to make themselves abominable by everything unclean and profane, so they would forget the law and change all the ordinances. He added, and whoever does not obey the command of the king shall die. Now, people go, how could that happen? Well, we've seen that happen even in this country. The President Speaker of the House made the statement that he believes there should be one religion in this country. And he said that he believes he has to act as Moses and bring people out of the land. Well, how hard is it to overturn it and take it to the next step if somebody will actually make that statement? So on the 15th day of Kislev in the 145th year, they erected a desolating sacrilege to the altar of burnt offerings. The books of the law they found, they tore into pieces and burned with fire. And anyone found possessing the book of the covenant, or anyone who adhered to the law, was condemned to death by decree of the king. They kept using violence against Israel, against those who were found month after month in the towns. And on the 25th day of the month, they offered a sacrifice on the altar that was on top of the altar of burnt offerings. And according to the decree, they put to death the women who had their children circumcised, and the families and those who had circumcised them, and they hung the infants from their mothers' necks. But many in Israel stood firm and were resolved in their hearts not to eat unclean foods. They chose to die rather than be defiled by food or to profane the holy covenant. And they did die. Very great wrath came upon Israel. The king's officers were enforcing the apostasy, came to the town of Moadim to make them offer sacrifices. Many from Israel came to them, and Matthias and his sons were assembled. Then the king's officer spoke to Matthias as follows: "You are the leader, honored and great in this town, and supported by sons and brothers. Now be the first to come and do what the king commands, as all the nations and people of Judea and those who are left in Jerusalem have done. Then you and your sons will be numbered among the friends of the king, and you and your sons will be honored with silver and gold and many gifts." And this is what Matthias said. And Matthias answered and said in a loud voice, "Even if all the nations that live under the rule of the king obey him and have chosen to obey his commandments, every one of them abandoning their religion of the ancestors, and I and my sons and my brothers will continue to live by the covenant of our ancestors. Far be it from us to desert the law and the ordinance. We will not obey the king's words by turning aside from our religion to the right hand or to the left." When he finished speaking these words, a Jew came forward in the sight of all to offer sacrifices on the altars of Moadim, according to the king's command. And when Messiah saw it, he burned with zeal and his heart was stirred. He gave vent to righteous anger. He ran and slaughtered him on the altar. At the same time, he killed the king's officer who was forcing them to sacrifice, and he tore down the altar. Thus he burned with zeal for the law, as Pinhas did against Zimri, son of Salo. Now here they're, of course, referencing where Pinhas took his spear and shoved it through Zimri, who was having an affair with a Moabite woman, and killed them both at that time. And now the days drew near Matthias to die, and he said to his sons, "Arrogance and scorn have now become strong. It is a time of ruin and furious anger. Now my children show zeal for the law, and give your lives for the covenant of our ancestors. Remember the deeds of our ancestors, which they did in their generations, and you will receive great honor and an everlasting name. Was not Abraham found faithful when tested, and it was reckoned unto him as righteousness? Joseph, in the time of his distress, kept the commandment and became Lord of Egypt. Pinhas, our ancestor, because he was deeply zealous, receives the covenant of everlasting priesthood. Joshua, because he fulfilled the command, became a judge in Israel. Caleb, because he testified to the assembly, received an inheritance in the land. David, because he was merciful, inherited the throne of the kingdom forever. Elijah, because he was of great zeal for the law, was taken up in heaven. Hananiah and Azariah and Mishael believed and were saved from the flames. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, for those of you that don't know the names. Daniel, because of his innocence, was delivered from the mouths of lions. And so observe generation to generation that none of those who put their trust in him will lack strength. Do not fear the words of sinners, for their splendor will turn to dung and worms. Today they will be exalted, but tomorrow they will not be found. For they have returned to the dust, and their plans will have perished. My children, be courageous and grow strong. Grow strong in the law, for there you will gain honor. Here is your brother Simeon, who I know is wise in counsel. Always listen to him. he shall be your father. Judas Maccabeus has been a mighty warrior from his youth. He shall command the army for you and will fight the battle against the peoples. You shall rally around you all who observe the law and avenge the wrong done to your people. Pay back the nations to full and obey the commands of the law. Then he blessed them and was gathered to his ancestors. He died in the 146th year and was buried in the tomb of his ancestor at Moedim. And all Israel mourned for him with great lamentation. So here we see a reciting of the Torah. He is going through and giving them a quick overview of all the important people that were really important to Israel and reminding them of that. And so he would have been responsible for teaching this to all of his people. Then Judas and his brothers said, see, our enemies are crushed. Let us go up and to cleanse the sanctuary and dedicate it. So all the army assembled and went up to Mount Zion. There they saw the sanctuary desolate, the altar profane, and the gates burned. In the courts they saw bushes sprung up as a thicket and as on one of the mountains. They saw also the chambers of the priests in ruins. Then they tore their clothes and mourned in great lamentation. They sprinkled themselves with ashes and fell down on the ground. And they blew the signal trumpets and they cried out to heaven. So I obviously skipped about 3 chapters. You can find the Maccabees online. If you just do a search for the Maccabees, there'll be Bible Gateway has it. You can read the Maccabees 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, as well as some of the other Apocrypha or Deuterocanonical, is what they're called in academic terms, the books between the testimonies. Then Judas detailed men to fight against those in the citadel because they had built the citadel of David and they were still fortified and the Greeks were still stuck there and he hadn't taken them out. But he wasn't going to wait till he defeated every one of them. He went and started cleansing the temple, the sanctuary. He chose the blameless priest devoted to the law, and they cleansed the sanctuary and removed the defiled stones to an unclean place. They deliberated about what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, for it had been profaned. And they thought best to tear it down so that it would not be a lasting shame to them that the nations had defiled it. So they tore the altar and stored the stones in a convenient place in the temple hill until a prophet should come and tell us what to do with them. Then they took new unhewn stones as the law directs and built a new altar as the former one. They also rebuilt the sanctuary and the interior of the temple and consecrated the courts. They made new holy vessels and brought the lampstand, the altar of incense, and the table into the temple. Then they offered incense on the altar, and it lit the lamps of the lampstand, and these gave light in the temple. They placed the bread on the table and hung the curtains. Thus they finished all the work they had undertaken. So here we see the fact that they obviously, I skipped the chapters of the conquest because there was a whole series of fights that went on, but they obviously recovered many of the items of the temple and they put that up. And if you remember from Gordon's talk yesterday about the stones being placed in the portico of Solomon, so that that when the prophet came, when Yeshua came and he claimed, I am the shepherd, they all realized that he was talking about himself being the Lord, because as we remember from Psalms 23, it talks about the good shepherd, and he was claiming and pointing to the fact that he indeed was the Messiah that they were looking for. Early in the morning on the 25th of the 9th month, which is by the month of Chislev, in 148th year, they rose and offered the sacrifice as the law directs on the new altar of burnt offerings that they had built. At the very season, on the very day that the nations had profaned it, it was dedicated with songs and harps and lutes and cymbals. All the people fell on their faces and worshiped and blessed heaven, who had prospered them. So they celebrated the dedication of the altar for 8 days and joyfully offered burnt offerings. They offered a sacrifice of well-being and a thanksgiving offering. They decorated the front of the temple with golden crowns and small shields. They restored the gates and the chambers for the priests and fitted them with doors. And there was great joy among the people, and the disgrace brought by the nations was removed. Then Judah and his brothers and all the assemblies of Israel determined that every year at that season, the days of dedication of the altar should be observed with joy and gladness for 8 days, beginning on the 25th day of the month. Second Maccabees 1:18 says, on the 25th day of Kislev, we shall celebrate into purification of the temple. We thought it necessary to notify you in order that you may also celebrate the festivals of booths and the fire given when Nehemiah, who built the temple and the altar, offered his sacrifices. Now, I have a question for you. Does this verse, this last verse, sound familiar to any of you? First Maccabees 4:59. Then Judas and his brothers and all the assembly determined that every year at this season, the days of dedication of the altar should be observed with joy and gladness in the 8 days and beginning the 25th day of the month of Kislev. Does that remind you of any other story in the Bible? We're going to look at that. Hold that in mind. Well, Esther. Yes, it is indeed. So what is Hanukkah about? Well, is it about festival of dedication? Is it a festival of purification, festivals of lights, or a festival of miracles? John 10:22. At the time of the feast of dedication took place in Jerusalem. So here is one statement of what it was. It was a festival, a feast of dedication. Second Maccabees 1:18 says, on the 25th day of Kislev, we shall celebrate the purification of the temple. So now they're saying it is a purification. And then on First Maccabees 4:59, it says, then Judas and his brothers and all the assembly of Israel determined every year the days of dedication of the altar shall be observed, right? And the Mishnah says, whoever is obligated to read the Megillah is also obligated to kindle the Hanukkah lamp. On the first night, a person lighting the lamp recites 3 blessings. They are, blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and has commanded us to light the Hanukkah lamp. The second one is, blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and who wrought miracles for our ancestors. And the third one is, blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and has granted us life and sustained us. When we look at these different descriptions of what the celebration of Hanukkah is about, at the time of Hanukkah, every year, there is a prayer that is said. This sometimes it's just called Al Hasim or V'Al Hasim, and it is said only twice a year. Well, let me rephrase that. It is only said two particular times of the year. It's actually said every night of Hanukkah. We thank you also for the miracles, for the redemption, for the mighty deeds and the saving acts wrought by you, as well as for the wars which you waged for our ancestors in the days of old at this season. This prayer is only said at Hanukkah and Purim. In Hanukkah, we say, we thank you also for the miracles, for the redemption, for the mighty deeds, and the saving acts wrought by you, as well as the wars which you waged for our ancestors in days of old at this season. In the days of Matthias, son of Johanan, the high priest, the Hasmonean, and his sons, when the evil kingdom of Greece stood against your people, Israel, in order to make them forget your Torah and violate your laws, you in your enormous mercy stood up for them in their time of great need, upheld their cause, judged their case, and avenged their oppressors. You delivered the mighty hands to the weak, the many into the hands of the few, impure into the hands of the pure, the wicked into the hands of the righteous, the degenerates into the hands of those who cling to your Torah. And you made for yourself a great and holy name in your world, performed a great salvation and miracle for your people, Israel, as you do today. And afterwards, your children came to the Holy of Holies in your house, and they cleansed your palace and purified your temple. And they kindled lights in the courtyard of your sanctuary. And they established these 8 days of Hanukkah to give thanks and to praise your great name. At Purim, we say a similar prayer. We thank you also for your miracles, for the redemption of your mighty deeds and saving acts wrought by you, as well as the wars which you waged for our ancestors in days of old, as in the days of Mordecai and Esther in Shushan, the capital, when Haman, the wicked, rose against them and sought to destroy them, to slay and to exterminate all the Jews, young and old, infants and women, on the same day, on the 13th of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. But you, in your abundant mercy, nullified his counsel and frustrated his intention, and caused his design to return upon his own head, and they hanged him and his sons on the gallows. So you have 2 prayers that are formed the same way. There are some similarities. One, Esther is the one book in the Dead Sea Scrolls that was not in the Dead Sea Scrolls. All of the other books of the Tanakh are in the Dead Sea Scrolls, except for Esther. The Maccabees is not found in the Bible, unless you have a Catholic Bible, then it is, because the Apocrypha, they chose not to accept this to be in the official Hebrew canon, and the Protestants don't have it in the New Testament or even in the Bible, but the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Christians have included the Maccabees, as well as some of the other deuterocanonical books. Other similarities: both festivals were declared by a leader of the Jewish people, not by God. So even though we see Yeshua observing it at the festival of dedication, he was in Jerusalem at the temple, as while it was not prophesied, it was stated that the prophet would come and tell them what to do with the stones. And Yeshua had to be aware of this story, because he was right at the exact place to declare the fact that he was indeed the Messiah that they were looking for, and he used that to enable their understanding. They knew exactly, when he said that, they knew exactly what he was saying, because here were these stones, here he was declaring who he was. And so it made a huge impact on them. And us as believers should definitely see that as a strength and a proof that Yeshua was not only Torah observant, he also was aware of the writings and the commentary of that time period. Neither of these festivals requires fasting. As a matter of fact, there's a prohibition in the Talmud against it, nor season of labor. It is really a time to have a good time. It's a time at Purim. We dress up, we put on masks, we have all kinds of candy given out to the kids. And of course, at Hanukkah, we eat jelly-filled donuts and latkes. And both celebrate God's miraculous intervention in Jewish lives and in our lives. They celebrate his miraculous intervention even to this day. And when we look at if we should celebrate Hanukkah, should we celebrate Hanukkah and Purim because it's a great excuse to party? And for some people, when I was in college, any reason was a good reason to party. But is that why we should study it? or because it's a festival in the Bible, though in this case we only find it in the New Testament, though we do find it Purim in the book of Esther, or because it's just a Jewish festival, and since we honor the Jewish festivals, should we do that? Or should we celebrate Hanukkah and Purim? Because God creates miracles in our lives to this day. When we look at our lives, we can look and see where there has been God's handiwork in our lives. If we take time and we look back over our lives, for me, I can say God intervened. I should have been dead here, right? Or I could have went this way here, and he stopped me. Not by my intent, for sure it wasn't my intent, but he had intent. And in every one of our lives, there are events that without God, we would not be where we are today. And that's what I think is the true message of Hanukkah. It is a message of deliverance, and that we need to take this time to rededicate our lives to God, and that we need to be grateful for the light that he has given us that we need to share to the world. I had a pair of Jehovah's Witnesses show up this afternoon, and we had a very interesting discussion, to say the least. But maybe I hopefully shared a little light in their lives. It is always there's always an opportunity to share, and that's really what the whole festival of Hanukkah is about: dedicating your life to God, letting his light shine through you, and grasping the fact that his miracles happen every day in our lives. Now, I was going to close with Adam Sandler's song on Hanukkah, because to me, I laugh every time I hear it. But unfortunately, I went and listened to it. It does have some offensive language, so I'm not going to play it today. But it's funny about how many Jewish people have made an impact in the world. If you look at the number of people in Hollywood, if you look at the number of people who won Nobel Prizes, of the contributions to the world, Israel as a country is one of the highest producing innovator of new products and ideas. God has blessed his people, and he will bless anybody who follows him. As Matthias told his sons, follow the Torah and the observant ordinances that we've been given, and God will bless us. Let's pray. Our dear loving Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for allowing us to have the Shabbat and the festival of Hanukkah, the festival of dedication, Lord, the festival of lights that you have given us to take the moment and rediscover the joy that you want us to have in our lives. And we thank you for the gift of your son, Yeshua, and all that he did for us. In his name we ask. Amen.
David, I gather in the book of Esther, I mean, God wasn't really mentioned. Was it mentioned much in the Maccabees?
God is never mentioned in the book of Esther, not once. His name is never issued. There's never a discussion about it. It's one of the reasons why they wanted to remove it and not make it one of the canonical books, the authorized books. And that's why it was not in the Dead Sea Scrolls, because the Essenes didn't believe in it.
Was Maccabees the same?
No, God is mentioned for dominantly all the way through it, that by God's miracles. And every battle we see, they thank God for what they've done. And if you read the Maccabees 1 through 4, I'm not sure why it wasn't included. 3 and 4 were questionable because it quit mentioning the Maccabees 1 and 2 is all about the miracles that God has done for us. 3 or 4 a little bit less, and it's more about the fighting. It's not so much about the work that God did. But no, it's mentioned all the way through the Maccabees, very much so. Being Torah observant, being observant to the laws and the ordinances all the way through the Maccabees. Where in Esther we don't see that. But I think
you.
there's two different lessons to be learned. In Esther, it's a lesson that God will save his people without your assistance. I mean, come on. If you read Esther in Hebrew, you go, man, Esther was not a very good girl, right? I'm sorry. She wasn't. She didn't go in that palace to have a conversation with the king. And they don't call it for one night with the king for nothing, right? It was not about her being a good girl, and she spent a year training to be a very bad girl. But God says, I can work with anybody. And that's the whole purpose with Purim, is God will find a way to save his people. And in the Maccabees, it's about the fact that if we're dedicated to God, he will help us overcome.